Simyase and Ta already explained this to me. But tell us now what the new millennium will bring to human beings of Earth and the planet Earth, according to the prophecies of Henoch.
I will do that in a moment, but I would like to explain before beginning that I am not authorized to give exact indication of years in an official manner. If the human being of Earth continues to live in the same way as he has done up to now, forming his thoughts and feelings in the same manner, indulging in the same actions as he has hitherto, then the words of the prophecies of Henoch could not be any clearer. The point in time at which these prophecies will begin to be fulfilled will be when a pope will no longer reside in Rome. All of Europe will then fall victim to a terrible punishment by evil powers. The Christian religion will collapse, and the churches and monasteries will end up in ruins and ashes. Monstrous forces will be created by science and will be released by the military forces and armies, as well as by terrorists, causing great destruction. Millions and even billions of people will be killed by acts of terrorism, by wars and civil wars, and finally, in some parts of the world, every third human being, and in other places, every fourth human being, will lose his or her life. The nations of the East will rise against the nations of the West against the East. Many deaths will be inflicted upon the people by fighter and bomber aircraft, and bombs and rockets will destroy and annihilate smaller and larger villages and cities. The people will be completely powerless against all this, and will live through 888 days of hell on earth, suffering hunger and plagues which will claim even more lives than the war itself. The time will be severe as never before experienced on earth. Ultimately, nothing can be bought or sold any longer. All provisions will be rationed, and if a human being steals even a small piece of bread, he or she will have to pay for it with his or her life. Many waters will mix with human blood and turn red, as once in the past the Nile in Egypt turned red with blood. And it will be that the fanatics of Islam will rise up against the countries of Europe, and all will shake and quiver. Everything in the West will be destroyed. England will be conquered and thrown down to the lowest level of misery. And the fanatics and warriors of Islam will retain their power for a long time. However, not only Europe will be affected, but ultimately all the countries and peoples of the earth, as the great horror expands to a war that will encompass the entire world. After the turn of the millennium, the papacy will exist only a short period. Pope John Paul II is the third from last in this position. After him, only one additional pontificate will follow. Then a Pontifex Maximus follows, who will be known as Petrus Romanus. Under his religious rule, the end of the Catholic Church will come, a total collapse becoming inevitable. That will be the beginning of the worst catastrophe that will ever have befallen the human beings and the earth. Many Catholic clerics, priests, bishops, cardinals, and many others will be killed, and their blood will flow in streams. But also the Reformed version of Christianity will become just as infinitely small as does Catholicism.
Horrifying weapons and a possible world war.
Due to the fault of scientists, enormous power will be seized by the power-hungry and their military, their warriors and terrorists, and power will be seized as well through laser weapons of many types, but also via atomic, chemical, and biological weapons. Also concerning genetic technology, enormous misuse will occur because this will be unrestrainedly exploited for the purposes of war, not lastly due to the cloning of human beings for warring purposes as this was practiced in ancient times with the descendants of Henoch in the regions of Sirius. However, this will not be all of the horrors, as besides the genetic technology and the chemical weapons, far worse and more dangerous and more deadly weapons of mass destruction will be produced and will be used. The irresponsible politicians will unscrupulously exercise their power, assisted by scientists and obedient military forces serving them, who together hold a deadly scepter and will create clone-like beings which will be bred in a total lack of conscience and will be scientifically manipulated to become killer machines. Division by division and devoid of any feelings, they will destroy, murder, and annihilate everything. The USA will set out against the eastern countries ahead of all other financial states, and simultaneously, she will have to defend herself against the eastern intruders. In all, America will play the most decisive role, when in the guise to strive for peace and to fight against terrorism, she invades many countries of the earth, bombs and destroys everything, and brings thousand-fold deaths to the populations. The military politics of the USA will likewise know no limits, as neither will their economic and other political institutions, which will be focused on building and operating a world police force, as it is the case already for a long time. But that will not be enough, and in the guise of a so-called peaceful globalization, American politics will aspire to gain absolute control of the world concerning supremacy in economy. And this will point towards the possibility that a third world war could develop. From it, if human beings as a whole will not finally reflect upon reason, become reasonable and undertake the necessary steps against the insane machinations of their governments and military powers as well as their secret services, and call a halt to the power of the irresponsible who have forsaken their responsibility in all areas. If this does not happen, many small and great nations will lose their independence and their cultural identity and will be beaten down, because the USA will gain predominance over them and with evil force bring them down under her rule. At first, many countries will howl with the wolves of the U.S., partially due to fear of American aggressions and sanctions, as will be the case with many, many irresponsible ones in Switzerland and Germany, but also of other countries. In part, others will join in because they will be forced somehow to do so or will be misled by irresponsible promoters of American propaganda. Finally, many Asian, African, and European states will rise up against the American hegemony once they recognize that the United States of America is only taking advantage of them for purposes of war, conquest, and exploitation. In this way, many countries will become puppet states of America before reason and realization will emerge in the responsible ones of governments and in many of the population, resulting in a turning away from the USA. However, the Great War will hardly be avoidable because the human beings of Earth will probably not accept the directions towards the better therewith, towards true love, true freedom, and real peace, striving instead only towards wealth, pleasure, and riches, and for all manner of material values and unrestricted power. Thus, huge and deadly formations of tanks will roll across the countries, while fighter planes and rockets sweep through the air and bring death, ruin, destruction, and annihilation to countries and people. If the Third World War will actually happen, as calculations and observations appear to indicate to be probable now and also during the approaching few decades, then as now the civilian population will above all have to bear the brunt of the enormous suffering in tremendous numbers in this entire catastrophe, and, last but not least, the fault of the irresponsible scientists, who by cloning will create human machines for military purposes devoid of conscience and feelings, and will create immensely deadly and all-annihilating, computer-like weapons. At the same time, the danger could become reality that the human combat machines, the military clones, will gain their independence and under their own. Management will bring death, devastation, destruction, and annihilation to the human beings of Earth and to the planet. The entire planet will become an arena of unparalleled suffering, which will never have existed before on Earth up to that time. The cruel happenings will last about 888 days and cause civilization to collapse. Yet, the terrible scenario will continue, and epidemics and various diseases as well as enormous famine will be spread among the people, while the economy of the world will totally collapse and there will be no possibility to produce any goods. All foods and medications will be rationed. The insanity of war will extend not only across the land, but the disaster will equally be spread to the oceans, into the atmosphere, even into outer space. But there will also be settlements under the ocean that will be developed in the course of the future, and these will be attacked and destroyed, claiming the lives of many thousands of people. However, a certain maelstrom of destruction will also originate from the undersea facilities, because in the cities at the bottom of the ocean, groups of submarine pirates will be formed which will burst upwards from the depths of the ocean and will become involved in destructive actions of combat with naval units on the surface. And at this time, the possibility could become reality that extraterrestrial forces intervene against the Western industrialized countries, because these will be responsible for the extreme and enormous disaster of the coming evil times. These extraterrestrial forces will give up their anonymity and their state of secrecy and will assist those who are being terrorized by the irresponsibly acting Western countries, should this possibility become reality. In addition, apocalyptic natural catastrophes will occur which will cause all of Europe to shake and tremble, but Europe will continue to exist, even after having suffered enormous destruction.
Destruction in North America.
Far in the West, it will be different. The United States of America will be a country of total destruction. The cause for this will be manifold. With her global conflicts, which are continuously instigated by her and which will continue far into the future, America is creating enormous hatred against her, worldwide, in many countries. As a result, America will experience enormous catastrophes, which will reach proportions barely imaginable to people of Earth. The destruction of the WTC, that is to say, the World Trade Center, by terrorists, will only be the beginning. Yet all the apocalyptic events will not only be brought about due to the use of unbelievably deadly and destructive weapons, such as chemical, laser, and others, and by cloned murder machines, but in addition to this, the Earth and nature, maltreated to the deepest depths by the irresponsible human beings of Earth, will rise up and cause destruction and bring death onto the Earth. Enormous firestorms and gigantic hurricanes will sweep over the USA and bring devastation, destruction, and annihilation, as this from time immemorial never before will have happened. Sick. Not only will America, but also all other Western industrial countries, which still live at the beginning of the new millennium in the delusion that they could dominate and rule over underdeveloped nations, that is to say, third world countries, will not only soon lose influence over these, but must defend themselves against them. According to the prophecies of Henoch, the truth about industrialized countries is that they only seem to appear to be true civilizations, but in fact, they are not, because more and more at the end of the 20th century and at the beginning of the third millennium, they will disregard all true love, true freedom, and true wisdom, as well as true peace, along with all values of humaneness and all values of men's and women's true being. But not even all the terrible happenings will hinder the USA in continuing to proceed with her actions against all countries. Even when the North American continent will be stricken by the most terrible catastrophe which has ever been recorded, evil military powers will wreak havoc with computerized and nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, whereby it will also happen that computerized weapons become independent and cannot be controlled any longer by human beings. Overall, this is the most important part of Henoch's prophecies.
There is still more to it. At least that is what you told me.
You are untiring, so I will point out a few more important facts of the prophecies.
Epidemics, conflicts, and disasters.
As of now, new epidemics have spread among the people of Earth. However, as Henoch prophesied, quite a number of further epidemics will follow. Not only AIDS will occur worldwide in the 1990s, but also epidemics such as the so-called mad cow disease, that is to say, BSE, out of which different strains of Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome will develop, lasting well into the new millennium. Also, an epidemic known as Ebola will cause many deaths, as well as other unknown epidemics and diseases which will sporadically arise in epidemic proportions and will be new to the human being, causing great concern. However, most of the evil will be brought about by politics. France and Spain become involved with each other in armed conflicts, and even before World War III will have broken out. Yet France will not only engage in armed conflicts with Spain, for within her great unrests will arise, leading to upheavals and civil war, as will be the case in Russia and Sweden. Especially in France and Sweden, machinations as well as dictatorial regulations of the European Union will cause much unrest and many uprisings, but also crimes committed by gangs and organized criminal elements in these countries will cause unavoidable civil wars. In addition, significant tensions will arise between the native citizens and immigrants from foreign countries, who, as a rule, also observe religious beliefs different from those of the native populace. And in the end, this will lead to severe conflicts. Hatred against strangers, foreigners, and people of different religious beliefs will be the order of the day, as well as the rise of neo-Nazism, terrorism, and right extremism. Conditions similar to civil war will be in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and claim many lives. The Soviet Union will be dissolved in this decade or at the latest by the beginning of the next. The man decisive for this action will be Mikhail Gorbachev. But this will not lead to rest, because the new Russia will continue its long-standing conflict with China over Inner Mongolia, with the result that Russia will lose a portion of this territory to China. And China becomes dangerous, especially to India, as also at this time China maintains uneasy relations with her. China will attack India, and if biological weapons are used, around 30 million human beings will be killed in the area of and around New Delhi alone. However, this will not be the end yet, because the effect of biological bombs and missiles, etc. used cannot be controlled at that time, and terrible epidemics unknown up to that point in time will arise and will spread quickly to many areas. Also, Pakistan will allow herself to be misled to instigate a war against India, which will be especially dangerous in view of the fact that both countries are developing atomic weapons.
Wars and devastation in Europe and North America.
Yet Russia will not rest and will attack Scandinavia, and in doing so will embroil all of Europe. And months before that, a terrible tornado will have swept across northern Europe, causing great devastation and destruction. It must still be stated that the Russian attack will occur during the summer, in fact, starting from Arkhangelsk. Denmark will not be dragged into the war due to the insignificance of this country. Yet Russia will not be satisfied with this action of war, as her will for expansion will be ravenous. And consequently, Russia will launch a military attack against Iran and Turkey and will conquer these two countries in bloody fighting, causing enormous destruction. In the Russian expansionist mentality will also be included the drive to gain control of the Middle Eastern oil deposits, as well as to gain control of the southeastern region of Europe. Therefore, she will also invade the Balkans and conquer these countries there in enormous battles, causing ruthless and devastating destruction with many deaths. This will be at the time that tremendous natural disasters will hit Italy and its people, causing severe hardship. But this will also be at the time when Vesuvius could become active again and could spread tremendous havoc. At the same time, a war will shake Italy and claim many human lives as well as cause great destruction. Destruction of war will descend on the northern countries as strong military. Forces will invade them from the east and will pillage and murder as well, as use bombs and missiles like hail coming down and hitherto unknown weapons, of laser and computer-controlled types which will destroy and annihilate everything whereby the first target will be Hungary and after that will follow Austria and northern Italy. Switzerland will also be severely affected but will not be the actual target. This will be France and Spain. However, the main objective of the aggressors will be to bring all of Europe under their military control, and for that purpose, France will be selected to be the headquarters. France will not only be invaded by the aggressors from the outside, but will also be conquered from within as a result of collaborative forces and other forces. This can be envisioned as being the many foreigners of a different religion living in France at that time, and specifically Islam, which will be this force working from within. Once France has fallen, a war to conquer Spain and England will take place. Subsequently, an alliance with the forces of the aggressors will be formed, which will invade Scandinavia. For all these French-based military operations, the weapons of mass destruction stored in the arsenals of France will be used and cause evil devastation, destruction, and annihilation. The aggressors from the east will force the French army to join their military forces and lead a war of conquest against the northern countries of Europe, invading and conquering Sweden and Norway. Subsequently, these northern countries will be annexed by Russia. Military forces will also attack Finland, whereby many will be killed and an enormous destruction will be caused. At the same time, as a civil war rages in Germany, an enormously bloody revolution will break out in England which will claim more lives than will be claimed by the civil war in Germany. And because England and Ireland have been at war for a long time already due to the IRA and the police and military forces of England, the result will be, because this feud will continue up to that time, that this revolution will spread out to all of Ireland, especially affecting Northern Ireland. Many lives will be lost during a civil war in Wales, where differences between various parties will arise before the Third World War. Welsh and English forces will clash especially near Cymru and claim many lives and cause great destruction. But death, destruction, and annihilation will not only rage in Europe, but also in America, where much suffering will have to be endured, and many deaths, as well as destruction and annihilation, will be. America and Russia will have the most terrible weapons of mass destruction at their disposal, a fact which is already the case to a certain extent today, and will clash with violent force against each other at that time of conflict, whereby Canada will also be dragged into this conflict. The source of this conflict will substantiate the Russian attack on the American state of Alaska and against Canada. This conflict will result in mass killings of human beings, as well as devastating destruction, annihilation, and epidemics, etc., which mankind of Earth will never have seen and experienced up to that time. Not only nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons will be used en masse, but also enormously deadly systems of computer-controlled weapons that are only in the beginning stages of development today, or will be invented and constructed during the third millennium.
Worldwide natural catastrophes.
As already mentioned, enormous natural catastrophes and rolling walls of fire and violent hurricanes will rage all across America, while, in addition, all the terrible effects of war will bring thousand-fold deaths, destruction, and annihilation. America's largest cities will be absolutely destroyed, and firestorms will cause great disaster and misery. Severe earthquakes and volcanic eruptions will also belong to that time, and these will cause much suffering and misery and deaths besides enormous destruction and devastation, as all of nature and the planet itself will rise up against the insanity of human beings on Earth. However, tornadoes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions will not only rage in America, but also in Europe and in the rest of the world. These activities have already begun at the present time, also during the past decades, with the exception that they will become increasingly more devastating in the future. And man of Earth is guilty for the most part today, as also in the future it is man who will destroy the entire environment, all of nature, the atmosphere, water, and all the resources of the planet. And through this, a shifting of weight inside the Earth takes place, caused, for example, by the creation of gigantic lakes by damming and by creating hollow caverns due to the exploitation of petroleum and gas, etc. And thereby unnatural inner Earth movements are created, which also lead to unnatural tectonic effects and cause earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, which also in turn cause enormous climatic changes resulting in horrendous tornadoes of devastating proportions which in the end will set their destructive energies free on the entire world. All of this will lead to increasingly horrible floods and unusually massive snowfalls which will advance to the southern countries and finally even to the equatorial regions, because through the insanity of human beings, the Earth has begun unnoticeably to spin strangely as a consequence of atomic explosions inside and on the surface of the Earth. And this will be the reason that the planet will slowly but surely enter an extraordinary spinning orbit around the Sun, while the first phase is already occurring, which causes a change in climate, leading to a new ice age.
Civil wars and anarchy in America.
Yet the misery on Earth will continue, as two terrible civil wars will break out in America, whereby one will follow the other. Afterwards, the United States of America will break apart and deadly hostility will prevail among her, which then leads to the division into 5 different territories, and it cannot be prevented that sectarian fanatics will play a dictatorial role. Anarchy will be the worldwide condition that will prevail and torment human beings over a long period of time, as human beings will also be tormented by the many epidemics and diseases, many of them new and unknown to human beings, and for this reason, incurable. Due to this fact, the bodies of many human beings will slowly and miserably decay, while unbearable pain will also occur as well as blindness and terrible respiratory problems that lead to suffocation. The consciousness of many human beings will become impaired and succumb to feeble-mindedness and insanity. And all these gruesome occurrences will be traceable to biological and chemical weapons, which are the cause of not fast but gruesome and slow deaths. And this will also occur due to the use of ray and frequency weapons, which are already being developed today. Finally, the words of Henoch may be specifically mentioned, which include that mankind of Earth in pursuit of technology for mass destruction and greed, for power, hatred, vengeance, and riches will ignore all values of creation, and will trample upon all values of love, wisdom, freedom, and peace as ancestors of the Henoch lineage have done before, to plunge the world into screaming misery, death, destruction, and annihilation, and into the most severe catastrophes mankind of Earth will ever have experienced.